Hello, everyone. I am trying to finish off this bottle, so I'm going to drink some rum, if you don't mind. And I would like to talk about immigration stuff. Let me read to you a little bit from a November 1986 story in the New York Times. The headline is, President signs landmark bill on immigration. It starts, I've written it here in my notes, President Ronald Reagan today signed a landmark immigration bill that prohibits employers from hiring illegal aliens and offers legal status to many illegal aliens already in the United States. And we all say to that, wait, legal status for illegal aliens? That's chaos. That's open borders. They should have come in the right way. Ronald Reagan, how could you? I want you to understand something. The Immigration and Control Act of 1986, it's very, very far from perfect, but what it was a piece of bipartisan immigration legislation that passed in my lifetime, which was miles to the left of where both political parties are currently at. Remember how, Kamala Harris was all running ads on how she'd be tough on the border? Remember how she poo-pooed Trump for spiking that that unbelievably draconian border act they were working on in 2024? Ronald Freaking Reagan's last speech, the one on how, anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American, that is now so far outside of the current conversation, even among Democrats, that, he would be shouted off at debate stage among the Democrats as some kind of, open border radical. So it's really, really worth talking about this 1986 law. Again, which passed in my lifetime. What did it do? I read the New York Times summary. The new law offers legal status, or amnesty, to aliens who can show that they entered the United States before January 1st, 1982, and have resided here continuously in an unlawful status since then. When the application period begins next May, so May 1987, illegal aliens will have 1 year in which to seek legal status. They will first become lawful temporary residents. After 18 months in that status, they could become permanent residents if they demonstrated a minimal understanding of the English language and some knowledge of the history and government in the United States. After 5 years as permanent residents, aliens may apply for United States citizenship. Think about this for more than 10 seconds and, get the shouts of amnesty is bad out of your head. And you realize how completely modest and reasonable this is. In 1987, if you had been around in the U.S. for 5 years without issue, you got documents and a status of legal residency, only temporarily. But you could then win your way up to permanent residency, a green card, if you put in a little bit more effort, and then also citizenship, if you wanted to have it. This also punished employers for recruiting undocumented immigrants for work, and also created the H-1A visa program for farm labor. Both of those items, which have been grossly misused in the meantime, as everything is. Remember that. And do remember, Ronald Reagan, Republican icon, and also for some reason, hero of the Democrats these days. They're all constantly talking about how freaking great Reagan was. He signed this thing. And then, since then, for the last 40 years, it has essentially been bipartisan uniparty policy to make immigration, including refuge and asylum seeking, harder and more draconian, and enforcement more and more militarized. Bill Clinton signed a law in 96. ICE was created under Bush II. Obama and Biden both broke records on deportations. And all that time, somehow we just never quite been tough enough. We've never made the border anywhere near enough of like a doom fortress. And so now we need masked secret police. We need these anonymous domestic military people operating beyond the standard legal system and only accountable directly to the president. And then just putting an illegal dragnet on the entire country. Like, that's what we've been doing. Like, the last 40 years has been leading up to where we are now. Why? Why are we doing it like this? ICE and Border Patrol, in their current forms, have no reason to exist. Even if you believe Trump about the hordes of dangerous criminals among the undocumented people, and that's all completely made up, by the way. Catching and dealing with dangerous criminals is the job of the police, the cops, not masked goons, not Proud Boys they gave a gun, a signing bonus, and 2 weeks of training. You do not need special, masked federal enforcers to deal with dangerous criminals who are also undocumented. For the same reason you don't need special paramilitary meter maids to deal with dangerous criminals who also have parking tickets. It's all still the cop's job. And if they're having trouble, and on the whole they're not, by the way, the cops are doing just fine, then you support the cops somehow. Maybe you pull a Zoran, right? And you create a non-police Department of Community Safety to focus on the stuff keeping cops from their proper jobs. Anyway, in any case, you keep it in the hands of the professionals. You don't throw billions of dollars at a goon squad who's going to shoot nurses in the back and moms and Hondas in the face. But if the problem isn't just dangerous criminals that the cops should be dealing with anyways, if it's just the presence of undocumented shadow communities in the U.S., if that's the problem, then we should learn from Reagan, and we should just go document them. Period. Society did not collapse in 1987, so rather than spending billions of dollars funding ICE and Border Patrol, spend a fraction of that money setting up tables and setting up booths and documentation drives throughout the country. Have people bring something proving they've been here for a while. I don't even know what they would have used in 87, but look at what they did, whatever they were doing then. They get temporary status, and then they go into the records. So we know who they are, and we kind of keep tabs on them and what they're up to. Then, once they have a temporary status, maybe later they can move up to a green card or citizenship if they want. So rather than, your fat SWAT teams in fleets of unmarked vans, save some money, send some bureaucrats in crappy suits out in like Chevy Malibus. And when they catch folks who are still undocumented, who haven't come into the documentation drives, you just give them a slap on the wrist. You slap them with a fine for $20, and you set them up with an appointment to go visit a immigration office nearby. Get them in the system. And you threaten them with another annoying fine if they don't show up. You don't terrorize populations into compliance. You try to make things as easy for them as you can, and then you pester them as needed. This is what we've always done. Problem solved. Just get people documented. Still no need for ICE or CBP in their current forms. And incidentally, like just documenting everyone would also make the cop's job easier of dealing with that whole like dangerous criminals thing. Because suddenly everyone in these communities is way more willing to come forward about safety issues when they come up, when there's like a creepy guy, hanging out near their building or something. Then, after that, throw a little bit more money into creating an immigration and border system that's fast and efficient. You create a non-stupid, non-draconian legal entry system that normal, useful people will vastly prefer, and which is designed to kind of weed out the bad apples such as they come up. And suddenly it's a lot easier to catch the bad guys when they try something. When you've reduced illegal entries to the point that where like whatever border enforcement you still need has a very easy job to do, that seems like a win-win. Done. Problem solved. And we've saved a ton of money versus whatever the hell we're currently doing. Like that's it. That's most of the argument. So, I mean, there's two more reasons why you might argue for basically an unaccountable federal paramilitary secret police, or why, immigration laws in general should be more labyrinthine and draconian than they are. One is jobs, and I'll get to that in a second. The illegals are stealing all the jobs. That thing. Let's get to that in a bit. But the other one is just that it's the objection that immigration in general is, it's kind of bad, kind of sketchy, or at least it is bad when certain kinds of people, wink, wink, kind of come in, and that maybe certain kinds of people, wink, wink, shouldn't be here at all. That is the last resort of the immigration hardliner, and that's just kind of a matter of fundamental bedrock disagreement. All I can do is express my personal agreement with Reagan, God help me, who said that America leads the world to the extent that it still does, because unique among nations, we draw our people, our strength, from every country and every corner of the world. Here I am quoting Reagan with approval. Jesus. Anyhow, we have to assume that there is a reason to the universe and to politics. Leibniz, nothing is without reason. Why are we doing this? Why have we done this, if not quite so spectacularly up until this point? Under both parties for decades. Why has it been like this? Why do we still do it this way if there's a cheaper, safer, more humane, less despotic alternative, which is just get everyone in the system? Oh, this is beautiful. Get a bottle of this if you can. Anyways, if you heard that question and your answer was rich people and power, give yourself a star, because you're beginning to catch on to this. Go back to that New York Times article I was quoting earlier about the 1986 Amnesty bill and read a little deeper. And you'll find out that there had been previous attempts at passing such a bill that had failed because essentially farming and business interests had killed it. Farmers in particular had been worried about keeping, and I quote directly, a steady supply of foreign workers. Footnote. The guy who pushed this thing past deadlock in 1986, essentially by way of the creation of the H-2A visa program, that guy, the guy who got this thing done, was one Representative Charles E. Schumer, a Brooklyn Democrat. Sounds like someone who can really get things done, right? I wish folks like that were still around, don't you? End footnote. If the really loud objection from the right to against immigration reform, well, not just the right, I mean the radical centrists too. If the loud objection is that amnesty is bad and people need to come in the right way, even though there effectively is no right way now because the system is so screwed. The quiet part that's always present and actually means something is, but what about the supply of foreign workers for jobs like farming? Okay, so, well, first of all, I should say, please understand, then and now, documenting everyone does not reduce the number of foreign workers. What it does do is give them rights, because documented residents have rights. Minimum wage laws apply to them. Foreign worker safety laws apply to them. The right to collectively bargain applies to them, and so on. They are free to report on violations of all this stuff and more to state and federal authorities without having an issue. So the constant concern about, again, a steady supply of foreign workers isn't really about not having enough foreign workers. It's about no longer having a permanent underclass outside of the laws that they can abuse and exploit as they want. Employers can, just by the nature of having this underclass, can pay undocumented people less, they can mistreat them, they can keep them in horrific conditions and always hold the threat of a
federal immigration army, which is ever more cruel, over their heads if they ever get uppity. And from that perspective, the apparently total dysfunction of our immigration system is not a problem. It's in fact a system that works very, very well because it supplies the rich and the powerful with cheap, pliable labor, period. And that fundamentally is why things are the way they are. And why, ultimately why Renee Good and Alex Priddy are dead. And why God knows how many others have suffered and died at the hands of federal immigration enforcement. It's not because immigrants are bad and dangerous or because undocumented residents and migrants have skipped the line. It's because things being this way makes the rich and powerful more money and more power. That's it. Broken immigration is about making money through exploitation. Period. So with that, keep that in mind. I can go back to that objection I skipped before, which is that the illegals, they're taking all the jobs, which has a shade of truth to it. But if that's your problem, if your problem is that the jobs are crappy out there here on the U.S. market, that they don't pay enough, there's not enough of them, rejecting immigration reform is the opposite of what makes sense. Like, it's true, having a permanent sublegal underclass of undocumented people who can just be endlessly exploited by the rich and the powerful it's not just a problem for that underclass. It's a problem for everyone who works for a living. That's true. That undermines labor. That pushes down wages across the board because the rich and the powerful always have access to that underclass. But what organized labor has understood for at least decades now, the days of the Chinese Exclusion Act are done. What they've understood is that you cannot solve this problem of cheap immigrant labor competing with domestic labor by using state power to exclude the immigrants. It doesn't work. The right approach is to make sure that the immigrants can come out into the open, that they can organize, that they can ally themselves with other workers to push back against exploitation and bad business practices. So that is to say, fighting for still more draconian immigration practices does not get rid of the weight pulling down your job market. It just makes that weight heavier. So you might ask, now we're going to get dark. You might ask, if I'm right, and the whole point of a crappy immigration system is to create this kind of underclass, then why are we now trying to catch and remove that underclass under Trump? To be clear, terrorism of those communities and the constant looming threat of removal, that's always been an important part of the formula. But isn't targeting absolutely everyone all the time now, isn't that counterproductive if the goal is a kind of docile working class? That's a very good question. It's a very interesting question. And for the beginning of an answer, I point you to one of my favorite YouTube channels, Farm to Tabor. I'm sorry. I will link that up down below. Basically, she points out that Chuck Schumer's H-2A visa program, remember he invented that in 1986, has now become basically a pipeline delivering foreign farm workers into slavery. Because, the problem for the rich and the powerful is that mistreated migrants can still ultimately just leave. And the rich and the powerful don't like that. But slaves can't leave, so they're better. So expect to see a big uptick in these kind of borderline legal H-2A visa immigrations over the next few years. And also remember, as a side note, that the formal abolition of slavery in the 13th Amendment here in the U.S. has a big fat carve-out in the form of criminals. If you convict someone of a crime and
you can still enslave them. That's not a problem. And Jim Crow, the history of Jim Crow, proved you can make entire industries out of that carve-out. So, a very plausible reason why this is happening, why it's gotten so much more active under Trump, is that they're beginning to replace the current system with something worse. Yeah. So just something to think about, and hopefully you can sleep tonight. So that's it. That's how I see the lines drawn. You are on the side of solving the documentation problem by just documenting everyone in some reasonably sensible way. And we can debate that. I'm all for debating that. Either you're on that side, in which case you are on the side of community safety, of affordable and efficient and unobtrusive government, of asylum and refugee rights, of strengthening labor power and labor markets, of, cultural enrichment, of not letting unaccountable masked thugs shoot your neighbors whenever they're just having a bad day. And on the side of Ronald goddamn Reagan. Or you are on the side of not solving the documentation problem at all, of just brutalizing communities, of the side of so-called labor discipline, which is basically just letting evil rich people do evil rich people things. That's pretty much it. That's the battle lines. That's the distinction. So yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but learn from Ronald Reagan. There has to be more ambition to the current debate than basically just quibbling over how cruel and how heavy-handed immigration policy should be. And if we don't widen that discussion, then we're never going to get out of this. That's it. Thanks for watching. Go with God.